Hi, I'm Caleb Giddings from Gun Nuts Media, and today we're talking about the third rule of gun safety. This is part 3 in our series on the 4 rules of gun safety, where we discuss the rules of gun safety, how to interpret them in modern times, and whether or not they're hard and fast rules or guidelines. Today's rule is Rule 3, since this is the third part, and you'll have to excuse me because my dog is acting very needy this morning. Rudy, do you want to say hi to the internet? Come here, come on. No, you just want attention. Okay. So anyway, on to rule number 3. Rule number 3 is never point your weapon at anything you're not willing to destroy. I actually don't have a problem with that one. I have to think about it a lot, but unlike rules number 1 and number 2, where they're kind of like guidelines that can be interpreted, rule number 3 is pretty straightforward. But is it? Right now I'm carrying a gun at the appendix position, and if I were to stand up, that gun is pointed in the general direction of my femoral artery. I don't want to destroy my femoral artery. I like my femoral artery. Similarly, when you carry at a traditional IWB position, your gun is pointed at your ass. I don't want to destroy my ass muscles either. I like all of my body parts exactly the way they are. I'm perfectly happy with the number of holes that's currently in my body, and I see no reason to add to those. So how do we go about interpreting this rule? Because if we accept that when you holster your firearm, it will be at some point pointed at something you do not want to destroy, what is the actual intent behind rule number 3? The way I like to look at it is pretty straightforward. Rule number 3 isn't talking about administrative actions. It's talking about having a safe direction when you're performing gun handling activities, okay? So for example, if I were to take out my carry gun right now, and I'm going to unload it with this dog just flipping crap on me right now, the whole time I'm doing this, there's a brick wall right over there, all right? That is a safe direction. If something terrible were to happen and this gun were to go and make a loud noise, it's pointed in a safe direction. It's not pointed at my dog, it's not pointed at my TV, it's not pointed at my couch, it's pointed at a brick wall. And that's kind of the intent behind this rule, is we don't want to unintentionally or intentionally or negligently point guns at stuff that we don't accept could catch a bullet from them. It's all about risk management in this situation. So for example, somebody in the comments to the last video about rule number 2 asked me if I would be comfortable doing a force-on-force evaluation with an obviously unloaded gun. No, I absolutely would not. And the reason I wouldn't be comfortable with that is that involves intentionally pointing a gun at something that you really, really don't want to put a bullet in, all right? Regardless of whether or not we know this gun is loaded, because we know for a fact, I've verified it multiple times, that this gun is not loaded, I'm still not going to, I'm going to do something now that I would normally never do. I wouldn't do this, for example, all right? I don't want to put a bullet through my hand. I wouldn't use a unloaded gun in a force-on-force simulation. That's what we have blue guns and CERT guns and UTM guns and all of the other non-lethal training devices for. I would use one of those instead of a loaded gun. The idea behind rule number 3, the interpretation behind rule number 3, is we don't want to intentionally point a gun at something that we don't plan on shooting or that isn't a safe direction. When we're holstering, we make an exception to that rule because whether you're holstering at the 4 o'clock position or at the AIWB position, there will be a moment where the gun is pointed at stuff that maybe you don't want to point a gun at. And that's fine, so long as we observe the other rules of gun safety. We treat the gun like it's loaded, so we handle it carefully and responsibly. We keep our fingers off the trigger, blah, blah, blah. And that means you're not going to accidentally shoot yourself. But as far as intentional pointing, a good way to think of rule number 3 is never intentionally point a weapon at something that doesn't need to catch a bullet. Alright? So, I'm intentionally pointing my gun at the brick wall that I use for my safe backstop when I dry fire and all those other things. That's okay. I know a bullet's not going to go through that. So even if I fail on my other safety precautions of treat all guns like they're loaded and all of that stuff, I know that if I have an accident, no one's going to get hurt in this situation. So when you really get down to it with rule 3, you don't want to intentionally point guns at stuff that don't need to have guns pointed at them. Don't use live guns for force-on-force training or for yeah, really actually don't use live guns for force-on-force training. One of the biggest examples of rule number 3 violations that you'll see is go to a gun shop, go to a gun show, go to any place where guns are on display and can be handled by the casual public. And I'm going to do something now that I also don't ever do because it drives me bananas when I see people do it. But you'll see people all the time. They'll pick a gun up off a table, and this will be the first thing they do. They'll go like this, or like this, or they'll cover the muzzle with their finger somehow, as if this little tiny piece of meat is going to stop a 9mm or a 40 caliber or a whatever caliber bullet is coming out of the gun. I don't get it. I see it happen all the time, though. I was just doing a demo this past weekend with some security forces weapons, and a non-security forces person walks by our booth, picks up one of the guns, and goes, do, 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 do. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't know if that's not loaded? Violating all kinds of safety rules. I knew it wasn't loaded because I verified it, but that just bothers me. Don't do that. So, bottom line, end of the video. Rule number 3, don't intentionally point guns at things that don't need to have guns pointed at them. I'm Caleb Giddings. This is Ruger's Pa. He's waving goodbye. Goodbye, Internet. Thanks for watching this video.